Hello, students. This is the continuation of Chapter 9 History, the Making of National Movement 1870s to 1947. This is the second video of this chapter. So, in the previous chapter, we talked about how the feeling of nationalism emerged among the Indians also, and how different type of political associations, especially Indian National Congress, was formed, which later on became the voice of India. Now, we also talked about how different different type of questions and issues were raised by the Congress regarding all the people of India. Let us continue with this. So today the topic we are going to start is freedom is our birthright. स्वराज मेरा जन्म सिद्ध अधिकार है. By the 1890s, many Indians began to raise questions about the political style of Congress. In Bengal, Maharashtra, and Punjab, leaders like Bipin, Chandrapal, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai were beginning to explore more radical means more impactful, forceful objectives and methods. They criticized the moderates for their politics of prayers and emphasized the importance of self reliance and constructive work. They argued that people must rely on their own strength and not on the good intentions of the government. People but must fight for Swaraj. Now, the thing is, these people were actually raising questions regarding how actually Congress is raising these issues. Congress was till now the party dominated by the moderates, and the methods they were using were very, subtle methods. These methods did not have that much impact. So, because of this thing, these radicals now became important. And these radicals were called by short name Lal Bal Pal. Lal is for Lala Lajpat Rai in Punjab, Bal is for Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Maharashtra, and Pal is for Bipin Chandra Pal. These three leaders were very important. They raised the question that हमको अपनी जो डिमांड्स हैं, जो हमारे इश्यूज हैं, हमको वो बहुत फोर्सफुली रखने चाहिए जिससे कि इसका इम्पैक्ट पड़े. They also talked कि how people should fight for स्वराज. खाली डिमांड करके प्रेयर करके नहीं होगा. We have to fight for it. And Tilak also raised a very famous slogan, Freedom is my birthright and I shall have it. स्वराज मेरा जन्म सिद्ध अधिकार है और मैं इसको लेके रहूंगा. This was the slogan given by Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Now, you can see in this picture, Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Notice the name of the newspaper on the table, केसरी. तो बाल गंगाधर तिलक ने जो न्यूज़पेपर स्टार्ट किया था उसका नाम था केसरी. A Marathi newspaper edited by Tilak became one of the strongest critics of British rule. इस न्यूज़पेपर में ब्रिटिश रूल को क्रिटिसाइज किया जाता था. In 1905, Viceroy Curzon partitioned Bengal. Earlier, the Bengal or the province of Bengal included all the areas of today's West Bengal, Bangladesh, Bihar, Odisha, etc. At that time, Bengal was the biggest province of British India, including Bihar and parts of Odisha. The British argued for dividing Bengal for reasons of administrative convenience. But whose convenience was this? Clearly, it was closely tied to the interests of the British officials and businessmen. So basically, the theory or the policy of divide and rule was enacted by the British over here. उन लोगों ने अपनी डिवाइड एंड रूल की पॉलिसी के अंदर बंगाल को डिवाइड कर दिया between West Bengal and East Bengal. And the reason which they gave was, since Bengal is very big, we are not able to rule it properly. So, which was obviously, we know that only to profit themselves, to help themselves, they divided Bengal. Even so, instead of removing the non Bengali areas from the province, the government separated East Bengal and merged it with Assam. And East Bengal was joined with Assam. Perhaps the main British motives were to curtail means to stop the influence of Bengali politicians and to split Bengali people. So the main motive was to stop the influence of the growing nationalist politics in Bengal and to split, or split means to divide the people. What happened after division of Bengal? The partition of Bengal infuriated people. Infuriated means made people very angry all over India. All sections of Congress, the moderates and the radicals, as they may be called, opposed it. Everybody was opposing it. Large public meetings and demonstrations were organized, and novel methods of mass protest developed. The struggle that unfolded came to be known as the Swadeshi movement. Please remember, Swadeshi movement was the struggle or the movement against the partition of Bengal. This movement was strongest in Bengal, but with echoes elsewhere too. In deltaic Andhra, for instance, it was also called, it was known as Vande Mataram movement. So, Swadeshi movement in Andhra region was called Vande Mataram movement. Please remember this point. Swadeshi means Mera Desh. The Swadeshi movement sought to oppose British rule and encourage the ideas of self help, Swadeshi enterprise, national education, and use of Indian languages. So, Swadeshi movement के अंदर ये सारी चीजें आ गई थी. Self help means becoming self reliant, आत्मनिर्भर. स्वदेशी चीजें यूज करना, जैसे खादी के प्रोडक्ट्स को यूज करना. National education, use of Indian languages like Hindi, Punjabi, Marathi, etc. To fight for Swaraj, the radicals advocated mass mobilization and boycott of British institutions and goods. Some individuals also began to suggest that revolutionary violence would be necessary to overthrow British rule. Now, the methods which were raised by the radicals are the people जो कि गरम दल वाले थे, क्योंकि कांग्रेस वाज डिवाइडेड इनटू टू ग्रुप्स. एक तो थे नरम दल, उनके मेथड्स ठीक ठाक होते थे. एक जो गरम दल वाले थे वो बहुत फोर्सफुली अपने मेथड्स को इम्पोज करते थे. सो दे सेड दैट टू फाइट फॉर स्वराज, अपने खुद के राज के लिए हमको क्या करना पड़ेगा? मास मोबिलाइजेशन मीन्स we have to include all the masses in the revolt, in the protest against the Britishers. And they also use the method of boycott karna, completely stop the use of British institutions like British colleges, schools, British courts, British factories, industries, etc. And British goods were like जो चीज़ें ब्रिटेन से यहाँ इंडिया में इंपोर्ट होकर आती थी, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल क्लोथ्स and other things. Some individuals also talked about using violence. They also said that if necessary, we will also have to use violence, which was also called revolutionary violence, to overthrow the British rule. Now, the opening decades of 20th century opening decades means from 1900 to 1920. were marked by other developments as well. A group of Muslim landlords and Nawabs formed the All India Muslim League at Dhaka in 1906. Please remember the date. The league supported the partition of Bengal. It desired separate electorates for Muslims. तो उन्होंने बोला कि Muslims के लिए अलग से electorates होने चाहिए. There should be separate seats for Muslims, a demand conceded by the government in 1900, and finally 1909 government agreed to give Muslims some seats in the administration. Some seats in the councils were now reserved for Muslims who would be elected by Muslim voters. This tempted politicians to gather a following by distributing favors to their own religious groups. Now, meanwhile, the Congress split in 1707. Sorry, 1907. So Congress split. Congress was divided. The moderates and radicals में divide हो गई थी Congress. The moderates were opposed to the use of boycott. Moderates said, no, 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 we should not use the method of boycott. This is not correct. They felt that it involved the use of force. So basically, moderates were not supporting any methods जहाँ पे force का use हो रहा था. After the split, the Congress came to be dominated by the moderates, with Tilak's followers functioning from outside. The two groups reunited in December 1915. So in 1915, after a few years, they reunited. They became one only. Next year, the Congress and the Muslim League signed the historic Lucknow Pact. Please remember, it's a very important event. And this happened in the year 1916, 1916, and decided where Muslim League and Congress they shook hands and they decided to work together for representative government in the country. So they joined their hands, both Muslim League and Indian National Congress. Let us now talk about the growth of mass nationalism. After 1919, the struggle against British rule gradually became a mass movement. Mass movement means where masses or all the people are a part of the movement. This mass movement involved peasants, tribals, students, and women in large numbers, and occasionally factory workers as well. Certain business groups too began to actively support the Congress in 1920s. So this is something very different because for the first time we are hearing that even women and common people like farmers, peasants are also a part of the movement. How did this happen? The First World War altered the economic and political situation in India. It led to huge rise in defense expenditure of the government of India. The government in turn increased taxes on individual incomes and business profits. So the British government what it did to fight, because it was already fighting the war, उनका मिलिट्री का खर्चा क्योंकि बढ़ गया था तो उनने क्या किया, इंडिया में लोगों पे टैक्सेस इंक्रीज कर दिया. More and more taxes were imposed on people now. This led to sharp rise in the prices. चीजों के दाम बढ़ गए. Prices increased, which created great difficulties for common people. So common people were not happy at all. On the other hand, business groups reaped fabulous profits from the war. We saw in earlier chapter, war created a demand for industrial goods like jute bags, cloth, rails, etc., and caused a decline of imports from other countries into India. So the group which actually profited during this time, during First World War, was the business group, or people who were who were into business and who were industrialists. They were the only ones who were profiting from the war. Indian industries like Tisco expanded during the war, and Indian business groups began to demand greater opportunities for development. The war also led the British to expand their army, since British people or Britishers wanted more and more soldiers. See what they started doing now. Villages were pressurized to supply soldiers for an alien cause. A large number of soldiers were sent to serve abroad. Now, people were forcefully in villages, people were forcefully asked to join the army. They were forcefully recruited in the British army, and then they were sent abroad in Europe to fight for the British. Many returned after the war with an understanding of the ways in which imperialist powers were exploiting the people of Asia and Africa, and with desire to oppose the colonial rule in India. So, all the soldiers who returned back from the war, they had this understanding that now we really need to throw these Britishers out of India because they are exploiting our country. They are not good for India. Furthermore, in 1917, there was Russian Revolution or revolution in Russia. News about peasants and workers' struggles and ideas of socialism circulated widely, inspiring Indian nationalists. So, things which happened in Russian Revolution now started inspiring people. In Russian Revolution, the peasants and factory workers, fought for their for they fought for equality. The theory of socialism uh, believes in equal share of all the social classes. सारे जो social classes है, whether it is rich, poor, factory owners, workers, जो profit है जो earn होता है वो सब में equally divide होना चाहिए. So ये society में equality की बात करता है.